They had the harmonies that made hearts melt, the sex appeal that could shut down a radio station, and the pen game that quietly shaped the sound of 90s R&B. Yet somehow you rarely hear their name when people talk about the golden era of soul music, and the reason why is darker than anyone ever admitted. This is the untold, gut-wrenching, and long-buried story of Intro, the platinum-selling R&B group that was primed to take over the world, and the tragic fate of their lead singer and genius songwriter Kenny Greene, a man whose voice moved millions, but whose truth the industry chose to silence.
I understand y'all work with a lot of people, from Mariah Carey to Jeff Ray.
Kenny wasn't just another crooner in a silk shirt singing slow jams to women. He was a military veteran, a once-in-a-generation songwriter, and the raw emotional core of a group that should have been as big as Boyz II Men, Jodeci, or Blackstreet.
First time I heard it, I said,
But instead got shoved into the shadows, not because they lacked talent or hits, but because Kenny Greene was bisexual and HIV positive in a business that demanded its black male stars be perfect images of heteromasculinity. At the height of their career, when they were writing hits for Mary J. Blige, collaborating with Will Smith, tying songwriting awards with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and flooding the airwaves with songs that felt like love letters dipped in honey, the machine that was supposed to protect and elevate them was already sharpening its blade, and Kenny was its target.
I'm giving him his credit right now.
And in the music industry, it's all about supply and demand. Adversely, I had a lot of jobs, and you see my name over a lot of stuff.
The group's label, Atlantic Records, had already started shifting their energy to newer, more marketable acts like the Braxtons. And when Kenny started losing weight, showing signs of illness, and hinting that his personal life didn't align with the industry's fantasy of what an R&B frontman should be, that was all it took. Atlantic shelved Intro's fully finished third album without a word, cut their budget, canceled the promo, and effectively ghosted one of their most soulful and successful acts.
When we go back and do our next album, you'll see more production credit by Intro.
You're telling me that this one has sold out already, the first shipment?
Kenny was even suspended from the group for allegedly disrespecting a DJ, a weak excuse that everyone knew was a smokescreen for pushing out someone who no longer fit their image of a star. And while fans were left wondering where their favorite group disappeared to, Kenny was fighting a war behind the scenes. A war for his health, for his identity, and for his place in an industry that was built to spit out people like him. He was hiding his illness even from his bandmates, brushing off the weight loss, the constant colds, the fatigue, with a smile and a wave, because he knew that the moment the truth got out, it was over. He kept writing, kept performing, kept showing up, even when his body was begging him to stop, because R&B wasn't just his job, it was his dream. But the dream didn't love him back. When Kenny finally came out publicly in the final months of his life, it wasn't with fanfare or drama. It was a quiet, honest interview in Sister to Sister magazine, where he admitted that he had been living in fear for years, fear of losing everything he worked for just because of who he was. He talked about singing to women on stage while hiding his relationships off stage, about the anxiety of keeping up appearances, about the weight of carrying a secret so heavy it could crush a career overnight. And by the time the truth came out, it was too late. Kenny Greene died in 2001 at just 32 years old from AIDS-related complications. No Grammy tribute, no BET Awards moment, no executive statements. The same industry that once called him a genius pretended like he never existed. It was like he vanished. And that silence wasn't just ignorance, it was violence. It was a deliberate choice to erase him from the narrative because his truth was inconvenient, his image no longer profitable, and his existence a challenge to everything the industry pretended to stand for. After Kenny's death, Intro was never the same. The heart was gone, the rhythm was broken. Buddy White, the group's in-house producer and Kenny's brother in music, stepped back. The dream was done. The calls stopped. The bookings dried up. So Buddy did what any man with a family and no income would do. He put down the mic and picked up a badge. For 17 years, Buddy White worked as a full-time New York City police officer, quietly patrolling the streets while holding on to the memory of a dream that had turned to dust. No one knew, no press releases, no farewell tours, just silence. He never told fans, never complained, just clocked in, did his job, and carried Kenny's legacy in his heart. Jeff Sanders, the group's third member, had already dipped out before. But this time he left for good. No call, no conversation, just a social media post announcing his exit. Buddy was blindsided, betrayed, alone. The group that once packed stadiums was now just one man with a badge and a broken heart. And for years, it seemed like that's how the story would end. But then, something happened in 2021 that no one expected. After almost 2 decades of silence, missed chances, and emotional scars, Jeff and Buddy reunited. And this time, it wasn't for clout. It wasn't for a quick cash grab or nostalgia tour. It was for truth. Together, they created a documentary, music, lyrics, and life. The real story of Intro and the man they lost too soon. And this documentary didn't hold back. It peeled back the layers, exposed the rot, and finally gave Kenny Greene the flowers he was always owed. It talked about the shelved album, the industry politics, the silence, the fear, the betrayal, the pain. But most importantly, it celebrated Kenny for who he really was. A brilliant, brave, and beautiful soul who never stopped loving the music, even when the music business stopped loving him. The documentary came with a gift too, the long-lost third album, finally being released as the film's official soundtrack. Kenny's voice, his lyrics, his truth, restored, remastered, and released for the world to hear. No longer hidden, no longer erased. This was redemption, even if it came after the pain. And that's the heartbreaking beauty of this story. Because Intro didn't fade out. They were forced out. They were a threat to an industry obsessed with image. They had a frontman who was too real for the shiny packaging of 90s R&B. And for that, they paid the price. But now, finally, the truth is louder than the silence. Kenny Greene wasn't erased because he failed. He was erased because he lived honestly in a world built on lies. And even though the industry tried to bury him, his story is rising from the ashes, carried by fans who never forgot, by brothers who are finally speaking up, and by a new generation that's ready to hear the truth. Kenny wrote for Mary J. Blige. He wrote for 98 Degrees. He helped shape the sound of a decade. He deserved tributes. He deserved awards. He deserved to grow old making music. Instead, he died in silence. And the industry let it happen. But we won't. Not anymore. Because Kenny's story isn't just about music, it's about identity, about survival, about what happens when you dare to tell the truth in a place that demands silence. It's about what the cost of authenticity really looks like. And now, as the documentary circulates, as the third album sees the light, as Kenny's name starts trending again, we have a chance to right a wrong, not by rewriting history, but by telling it honestly, by naming the people who failed him, by honoring the man he truly was. Because Kenny Greene was a legend. And Intro was more than a footnote. They were a movement that the machine couldn't control, so it tried to crush them. But we're still here, still listening, still remembering. Because you can silence a voice, but you can't kill a legacy. And Kenny Greene's legacy is finally getting the spotlight it always deserved. Subscribe. Now, if you believe real stories deserve real recognition. Because after decades of silence, the truth is finally singing. And this time, the world is ready to listen.